Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek program at the Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the Education Assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are in one of our hoop houses where we do our propagation, because today we've got a program for you where we're going to teach you how to build your own mist system at home. Our nursery technician, Sophia McCusker, she went through great efforts to pull together a presentation for you all to teach you how to do this wonderful skill, and we are very excited to share it with you all. Our program today is pre-recorded, so I will be showing the pre-recorded segment that we filmed. Afterwards, we will have a Q&A session. You are welcome to drop any questions about what's going on at any point in the chat, and then we will certainly cover them at the Q&A session at the end. Okay, and so with that out of the way, I think I will get things going and get this program started.
Hi, I'm Sophia McCusker. I'm the nursery technician here at the Raulston Arboretum. Today you are getting a little bit of a behind the scenes look at we are in a polyhouse in our nursery, and I'm going to show you how to do a DIY mist system if you're doing your own propagation. So I've got my setup here, and I'm going to talk you through kind of the tools I used and the products I used and how I selected them. And kind of what my design reasoning was. And hopefully you guys can build from this, make your own, and propagate away. First, we're gonna go over some PPE, personal protective equipment. Safety glasses are a must when you're using saws or cutters. Gloves are good. I like disposable gloves. However, some of the chemicals in the PVC glue can actually melt through them, so be careful if you're using those. I really like the nitrile dipped gloves just to work with and keep the glue off your hands. Next, we'll go into tools. So I have some channel locks, which are handy because PVC tends to stick and not want to come apart for us easily. So you don't have to use a lot of force because you'll break your pipe, but they're really handy for getting pieces apart. Next, we'll talk about cutters. I've got these. These are a basic pair of wire cutters. I really like them. If you don't have them in your toolbox, they're not very expensive, and they have this gauge on them which cuts to a certain gauge, to the gauge of the wire, and strips the plastic off, which we can talk about why that's important later. If this is all you have, this will work. Just a pair of, these are lineman shears or lineman pliers, and if you're too heavy-handed, you can easily cut through your wire when you're trying to strip the plastic off. A cutter, I use a pipe cutter because I have one, and we do a decent amount of irrigation work here. And it's a crank style specifically for PVC. And I like it because it ratchets and you kind of twist the pipe. But if you don't have that, but you have tools, you probably have a hacksaw. They come with different blades, different lengths, different blades, but you've probably got one in your toolbox, or someone you know probably does. And this will work just fine. Measuring tape is also a must-have. Measure twice and cut once. I did a lot of sewing growing up, so always measure twice. And then we've got PVC glue. So we've got the purple primer. This just cleans and prepares your pipe, so I don't worry about it being super clean. I just give this a good coating on it. Don't be stingy with it. You're not going for pretty, you're going for functional. Any hardware store has the purple primer. I like the purple primer because you can see it, so you know where you've been. And then just an all-purpose pipe PVC. This is for a lot of different things. But pipe glue. Do this outside in well-ventilated area because it is stinky. Because we're doing this in January, I actually glued outside and then brought inside because this is temperature sensitive. So just be mindful, do it either on a warm day but you don't want it to be exposed early on to a really harsh cold. Again, don't be stingy. If you really don't like how much glue you put on it, you can always wipe it off. But when gluing, you want to make sure that you hold your 2 pieces of pipe. You push it in all the way. Here, I've got a fitting here. I'll example. Fittings tend to have a ridge in the center line. You want to make sure you do your glue and push your pipe all the way in, and then hold it there for about 30 seconds. And that prevents it from pushing back out and not getting a good seal. The mist fittings that I got are this, they're all one piece. I can't vouch for the quality of them. There are a couple things I noticed when putting this together that makes me wonder if they're going to be long lasting. But my goal with this was to get things that you can easily get a small quantity of, and you don't have to worry about going to a commercial store, or like you can buy these I got from Amazon. Home Depot and Lowe's had them, but they were back ordered, and I got them in a package of 5. And then, so these are just mist fittings. I will share links of everything that I got, and we'll put it in the description or wherever it goes. I will also make sure to share this because I got these next few items from the recommendation of another YouTube video, and the name of the channel escapes me, but he did a really good breakdown and tutorial of how to program this timer. A lot of nursery timers tend to be really expensive. They can be upwards in the thousands of dollars, especially for second intervals. So you can go to Home Depot and just get a Rainbird timer, but that's only going to run it in minutes. It's not going to have any second options. Like I said, it can get really expensive going up to a second timer, or a timer that will count you, 5 seconds every 5 minutes. And this was a fairly inexpensive option. This is the box, but this is the timer itself. And I started to program it, but didn't get all the way there. And this plugs into a normal outlet, and then you'd plug your solenoid, which we'll get into. I'm still working on figuring out how to program it, but like I said, other video has a really good instructions on it. This is a Chinese, it's off Amazon, and so the instructions are not the best. They're not the most comprehensive, but I'm really excited to work with this and try it and see how it works. It is not listed for in-water use, so what I would recommend is putting this system up on a shelf so that with the wires kind of tucked away. And that will lead me to our next thing, because the solenoid is generally wired in, they're not plug-in. So I had to get an adapter, and this adapter has a really long cord, and the cables that are wires that will attach to our solenoid. This calls for a specific, the solenoid calls for, let me read the box, a 24 volt power supply. So just make sure your power adapter and the solenoid are on the same 24 volt. I think that's right. And that brings us to the solenoid. So you've got your timer, which is kind of like the brains, and then this is what is going to make your timer turn the water on and off. So if you go to our system over here, we've got the hose plug in. If you imagine the hose is on, this is the solenoid. This is what runs a lot of my irrigation, all of my irrigation systems. And basically, it defaults to off, and then a electrical current turns it on. So the timer flips on, it sends it power, tells it to turn on for however long, and then it closes. They can be really finicky. but we don't have to get into that. It's going to work great for you. But occasionally, you know, and I think this is a consumer rainbird. I got it from Lowe's. And they have a really good breakdown of what all these do. You've got the solenoid itself, which is a valve. Like I said, when the power goes through, it opens it up and allows the water to come out. The two wires don't matter which ones are which. That was something that was really intimidating to me, but in this use case, you just twist them together. They're both the same, or all four of them. They'll do the same thing. We'll do that in a minute. Teflon tape. If you're a avid hose user, you probably have some Teflon tape. It is like magic if you've got a leaky hose. So I had to put it on all of my twist-on fittings. So I've got a hose to 1-inch PVC that goes into the solenoid, and I've got Teflon tape here, as well as up here on the 1/2-inch PVC goes back into 1-inch. And that's just so I can break it down. If I redid this again, I'd probably do a twist on end at the other end so I could drain it easily. But we can talk about design changes in a minute. Hose washers are always a good thing to have on hand anytime you're doing irrigation, because they fall out, they wear out before you know it. You have a leaky hose. Those are your two leaky hose solutions. I wanted to mention, so I've got this frame, it's just stuck together. Like I said, channel locks because it's very gluey, or it's very sticky even without the glue. So it won't hold pressure, but it'll hold it up. And I chose to do PVC because I have all these PVC fittings laying around. So you could mount this on a shelf, or build a wooden structure. Your structure is up to you. Choose your own adventure. This is what I had, so I did it this way. I think that might be all the tools we need. So we can talk about kind of what my design strategy was here. You can see this very comprehensive list and diagram program. It's great. But you know what, y'all, it doesn't need to make sense to you, because it made sense to me when I went shopping. And that's all that's important, is drawing a picture that you can make sense of. Because this, I managed to convert to this, which is all we need. A good hint that I would give when working with PVC is to make sure that you lay your parts out. So measure and then lay your pieces out in order. So when I did this, I would lay the 3-inch pipe down, or the 3/4 inch pipe down, and then lay in where I was going to do my fittings, or draw a diagram of it, because for starting out I only had the pipe and these fittings, so I had to figure out what all I needed. And that really helps wrap your head around, okay, do I have the right pieces? Do I have all the pieces? Because PVC, inevitably, like any project, you always are missing that one fitting. But this time round with the paper, and it worked out really well. Okay, so you saw it all put together. I sort of disassembled and took a step back, and we're gonna go over kind of piece by piece and how we're gonna reassemble it, the mist system, that is. So first I got this is a standard garden hose, which is a 3/4 inch fitting. And then I had to get an adapter to go into my 1-inch pipe. I don't like switching generally from different pipe sizes, but the easiest to get solenoid is 1-inch PVC, screw-in PVC. So I've got the hose adapter, the adjuster to 1-inch PVC, the 1-inch slip fitting, to a 1-inch screw on. Again, I like the screw on is what comes with the solenoid, and I really like that because you can adjust it, you can disassemble it, you can change your solenoid. And these, again, you can see I've already Tefloned it, so you can take this apart and reuse it. The Teflon doesn't have to be done every time you screw it together. And you just screw it on. The solenoid will have a flow marking with a little arrow that tells you how the water will flow. I don't know what would happen if you turn it on backwards. I think it just wouldn't work. So it's real simple. Just screws on. Don't over tighten it because it doesn't need to be super tight. With that Teflon tape, that'll kind of fill in the gaps, so you don't need to worry about cranking it down. Next, I have this piece, which I did my 1-inch screw on elbow, just a 12-inch PVC, because that's how high that's a good height for, you're not going to have big cuttings, you're going to have little cuttings, and you want enough space for the water to kind of fan out and give you good coverage. So 12 inches is a good rough estimate. To an elbow, I figured having the elbows go different directions would give me a little bit better access if it's on a table. If you imagine it on a table, that's why it's kind of a weird shape. Then it goes down to, I think I said earlier, 3/4 inch, but this is actually 1/2 inch pipe. And that's just the fittings, the mist fittings that I could find were 1/2 inch. So we've got 1-inch converter to 1/2 inch pipe, and then we need a little bit of gap there, and then a 1/2 inch screw on fitting. And then we get into the mist arm. And that is, I did the mist fittings 6 inches apart. So I went and got a 3-foot piece of 1/2 inch PVC, Schedule 40. And the 1-inch pipe is also Schedule 40, or I would recommend getting Schedule 40. The 1/2 inch is Schedule 40, which is a thicker wall. The 1-inch is Schedule 20, which you can see is a really different thickness in the wall. And that matters just because of the pressure. The Schedule 40 can withstand more pressure, and it's less likely to fail. So basically the Schedule 20 is scrap for us because we're dealing with high pressure here. So we've got the female screw-on 1/2 inch adapter to 6-inch pipe to a mist fitting. You can see what I was saying with the glue. Don't be pretty about it. We're not painting windows, but you want to make sure you've got good coverage and you're working with a clean surface when you glue it. The glue actually kind of melts the surface of the PVC, or at least that's what it seems like. So you've got to work kind of quickly. It sets fast. So I've got 4 pieces at 6 inches connected to the fittings, and then I just left this long, so I've got some flex space to work with and adjust it, and then just an end cap. And that's kind of that's the part that will hold the water. So we'll put that together real quick and finish this. So we've got the piece with the hose connector, and then that goes together. And it feels kind of big and clunky, but it's gonna be great when it works. And then we'll come back to that. I'm gonna put together, this is just a frame. I made this frame just to hold it up as an example of how you could, like I said, if you don't have PVC laying around, you could do it under a shelf. You could do a wooden structure. The structure is up to you. This has nothing to do with the mist part. This is just so it stands where we want it to, and we can turn it on and show you how it works. And this is an example of when you need these channel locks, because we'll see if it's probably going to cooperate now because we're filming. So these I just guesstimated on these sizes. I have 12 by, I think they're 18-inch flats, or 12 by 24-inch flats. So I based my space sizing off a single flat, and left a few inches on either side so you've got good coverage. So this frame doesn't carry water. It's really just a frame to hold the whole system up so you can really see how it works. And one thing I didn't expect when designing this was that the mist nozzles would be so much bigger. So ideally, in my brain, it was going to slip all the way through and work great. But in reality, you kind of have to wiggle it. But I'm still pleased with how it came out. And then this is where we might use channel locks, because this fitting has given me a hard time each time I've put it together. So that just screws together. And then, so it's starting to give me a little bit of fight back, and I'm not gonna be able to grip it enough with just my hands. But obviously we want the mist nozzles pointing down. I do want to point out, when I was putting them together, I didn't put them all in a line, because just to make sure you've got good overlap, because you want the whole surface to be getting mist. So if you look down the pipe, like this one's pointing this way and this one's just a little bit off. It's not a lot. And then this one's pointed straight up again, and this one's kind of angled down. So because it's given me fight back, we're gonna get out the big tools. And it's firm, but you're not cranking it, because if you crank it and you put a lot of force behind it, you can crack your fittings, you can crack your pipe. And then there is crying over cracked PVC when all 5 of your pieces are put together and you don't want to redo it all. So just enough so that the pieces are pointing down, because again, we got the Teflon tape in there, which is magic. And you're ready for water. So just a normal garden hose. I love a good shutoff valve. I almost turned it on. That would have been fun. And that, if you don't know, I assume if you're propagating plants, you know how to twist in a hose. And that's it. So I can turn the water on now. My solenoid is off. So I'll go through and show you how to turn on the solenoid manually. Because if we turn the water on, let's all cross our fingers and hope that this doesn't spray water in my face. Oh, but I turned the water off earlier. Okay, there we go. There's my leaky hose pipe that I love so much. All right, so we're gonna turn that off, that on. I thought I turned the solenoid off. Just kidding, the solenoid's on. And there's your mist. This is not a cutting, but you could probably use a piece of water or a piece of paper or something just to check your coverage. That's really important to just see, make sure you're getting, maybe that was residual pressure. It's not an irrigation project unless something goes wrong and you can't explain why. So this is your on-off valve. The solenoid is supposed to be off. I don't know why it just ran. Some mysteries will never be answered because it's off now and I didn't do anything. But to turn the solenoid on and off, it's a quarter turn with this particular solenoid, and it's this big thing. This is the brains of it. This is the only part that is electrical, and it should be a quarter turn. Watch it be like 3/4 of a turn. Or watch it not turn it on at all. There we go. And that was me using the manual turn on, which is basically doing what this will do when we have it hooked up to electricity. And again, solenoids can be sensitive, so don't crank on it. You're going to have residual pressure from when it runs, so you're not going to get a clean on and off, because in my irrigation systems here, we have pressure regulators. We usually have one at the beginning of a line and before it goes into your solenoids, and we don't really need it. It'll be fine without it, but you're going to see them run for a little while while that initial pressure wears down. Let's work on wiring this boy. So these are what I had laying around. They are called wire nuts. I, of course, don't have a brand name or a picture on the front because this is the box I had in my irrigation drawer. They're just like wire nuts, but they have on the inside this jelly that makes really good connection for the wire, and it keeps the water away from your wire connection, which is good because electricity and water generally don't mix. So in theory, these wires are probably good enough to twist together, but I always like to do a clean cut because then it gives you something to work with. And it shows you how to use this fancy tool. So you're gonna cut through, like again, I like these pliers because they cut through only that plastic coating on the outside of the wire. And then you strip it off. And you do the same to the solenoid side. And you clean up the ends. And then you just twist them together. And that just allows for really good contact on the wire. I think in theory these wire caps have a little screw system in the back there. I like to screw the wires together. You probably don't have to, but. And then you literally just put them in. And you can kind of feel it bite. So that in theory, if you really pull on it, you'll pull it off, but you know it's good when you can kind of give some tension to it and it doesn't pop off. And I'll show you, let me show you the inside. We need more Teflon tape on that solenoid. But let me show you I don't know if you can see the goo on there. It's magic goo, and it seals the connection up. These are what I use in the nursery here. They last forever until someone pulls on them too much, and then you come in and find all your plants dry. It's happened once or twice. So I don't like how that looks because I've got wires at all different lengths. So I went a little too deep on that when I stripped that plastic off. So I'm gonna start over. That one's much better. All the little fibers of the wire look about the same length. I'm gonna clean this off a little bit. And we'll just marry them together. And then again, I love these. These are so easy to use. You kind of test them. And then I would dress your wires a little bit. I knew I needed zip ties. I couldn't remember what I needed the zip ties for, but if this were me, I would zip tie this wire so it's kind of dressed. I'm not actually going to use a zip tie because I don't want to be married to this. I'm going to take this apart. But dress your wires, tuck them in close, because if you are taking it apart, if your solenoid if your wires do come off and you need to redo it, this is all the wire you have, which seems like a lot, but when you have to redo it a couple times, you don't want to be dealing with tiny little strings of wire. So just wrap that up and zip tie it, and it'll save you frustration later. So in this specific setup, this adapter would go into this timer, and you would set your electrical connection up somewhere away from the water. We didn't talk about where you would put this, so I'll touch on that a little bit. Somewhere where you don't mind getting stuff wet. This could use some plastic around it, depending again on your setup. It wouldn't hurt to have plastic surrounding it so it'll hold in that humidity. My initial thought for design was to put like a Rubbermaid, make it so it fit into a Rubbermaid container. That could be really easy and really handy. If anyone does that, make sure to send us pictures. I would not recommend doing this in your home unless you're prepared to set it up so that you don't get water damage, because stuff like this tends to explode, you know, at the least opportune times. So definitely be mindful of that. I would say a garage for winter use. It would be a little on the cooler side, but you could also invest in a bottom heat mat if you're doing hardwood cuttings. In the summertime, your garage is going to be about the perfect, it's going to be about the perfect temperature actually, if you're in the Raleigh area, because it'll say it's not going to hit that really blazing hot, like when we have a 90-degree day. It's not going to hit, your garage is not going to hit 90 degrees, more than likely. Or a back deck, it could be outside, or a porch, or a kitchen if you feel frisky. That would be a little I'd be hesitant to recommend that because I don't want to be responsible for anyone's flooring damage. But obviously you need to set up somewhere where you're going to be able to, you're going to get water, it's going to get wet, and the water input is going to be on if you want it running all day. As far as timing settings, I think my mist right now is set to every 10 minutes it comes on for 6 seconds, because the plants right now aren't active. The cuttings I'm taking are dormant, and again, this is January, so you're going to be taking dormant cuttings. They're not going to be expiring as much, so they don't need quite as much mist. Also, the sun is out for a shorter period of time. It's not as intense. But in sometime, you know, for spring cuttings or summer cuttings, I'd probably go every 5 minutes, 5 or 6 minutes. And the goal is not to wet the media. The goal is to just keep the foliage wet, so that it's staying moist and it's not desiccating. If you're noticing that your media is staying really soppy, you want to cut your, increase how long between each mists. In researching for this, I heard people say that they set it up and they ran it, you know, they did a hose, just a normal hose timer that ran for a minute, and they ran it for a minute like 3 times a day, and that was plenty. It just kind of depends on how, it's all a grand experiment, right? So propagating plants, you're gonna take some aren't gonna take it all, some are 100% gonna root every single time. And don't be too hasty, because certain things, especially if you're doing hardwood cuttings, some of those plants can take upwards of 12 weeks. I've had cuttings root after a year. Hardwood cuttings, I rewounded them and stuck them after about 6 months, and then I got roots off of them probably 3 to 4 months later. So I guess it was only 9 months, but still, they can take a very long time. Thank you for joining us for this program. I hope that gives you some insight on how to get started on your own mist system, and then you can grow many plants. and keep them happy and thriving.
Okay.
Oh, this hat is ridiculous.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And that was a wonderful presentation, Sophia. So thank you so much for pulling it together.
So much echo.
Yeah, it's a lot of echo, but
Okay.
now it's handled. Now it's under control. Okay, we did have some questions come in while that was happening. Okay, first off, Debbie asks, how do you decide how many misters to put on the arm?
I went with the mist spacing. So I think it ended up being about 12 inches. And honestly, I kind of guessed, but you want enough coverage. So it all depends on how long the arm is. Mine had 4 because the cone, that mist cone kind of looked like about 12 inches. So if you draw circles, I don't know if anyone else is familiar with those diagrams of the mist, of the like water coverage.
Normal mortals wouldn't be. Yeah.
Normal mortals wouldn't. But if you kind of think about like overlapping circles, like you want all the things to be covered. So,
For sure.
Measure and figure out how big your area is and then adjust accordingly.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I'll note is that that setup that Sophia had was mostly just to fit like 1 or maybe 2
Yeah, it was
trays underneath. You could theoretically put a T-joint where it comes out and then have 2 lines of misters coming off of it, and you could have more space that way. But again,
you could get real elaborate.
you could get real elaborate. But like Sophia was saying, it's coverage is key, and just make sure that you are covering the space which you are intending to propagate under. Yeah, for sure. Alrighty. So Rich had a comment. He says, on the threaded joints, did she use Teflon tape? Would that have stopped some of the leaking there?
I'm not sure which leaking you're talking about, but maybe. Well, that was the problem.
With all of the threaded joints, you certainly did use Teflon tape.
I did use Teflon on all the threaded joints, and I think the hose was leaking because I've got a plastic turn-on. That shutoff valve is plastic, and I think the actual fitting is cracked somewhere because I replaced the gasket and did Teflon tape, and it's still leaking. And that hose is brand new. So
we filmed that segment actually and didn't include it in the final cut, but Sophia did put a brand new washer in there and Teflon taped it, and we plugged it. Dramatically reduced the amount of leaking that was coming out of that hose, but it was still dribbling a little bit, and we think it was just because of the cheapness of the fitting itself. But they do make brass fittings, and I think with
those are my jam.
Oh yeah, brass fittings, you can't beat those for sure.
Those, you do have to be careful though, because brass and plastic sometimes don't want to be friends, and they will strip the fittings.
No kidding.
The brass will strip the plastic threads.
And another thing that popped into my head when you said that about brass is you need to be mindful that this system is going to be connected to a water line that's always on. So if you're doing this in the winter time and you're looking at a freeze, you gotta cut that off. You gotta disconnect everything, or you might have some very exciting explosions, like Sophia mentioned, on your hands. And those are never fun. They always happen at the most inopportune time. Oftentimes it'll be completely frozen over and you can't do anything about it, but it's still a crisis that you got to take care of.
Yeah, so. And like I said, with this kind of like the weather, if you're in our area, the weather we're having, I think all our water here is turned off.
Oh, sure.
So you probably wouldn't have cuttings outside in this weather.
For sure. But with how cold it is, it won't be losing too much moisture either. So it's not the most critical at this time of year either. So cool beans. And Rich also commented wants to know if they are waterproof wire nuts.
Correct.
And they are in fact waterproof wire nuts.
Waterproof wire nuts. Say that 3 times fast.
I couldn't even begin to. But that goo that we attempted to show, couldn't really get a good shot of it. But there's a goo inside those wire nuts that is silicone.
A non-conductive silicone.
A non-conductive silicone, and it helps keep the electricity away. It also helps prevent corrosion. And
it prevents corrosion. It stops. It helps keep the water out. So it's kind of like in a protective little bubble in there.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely want waterproof wire nuts. Okie dokie. Okay. I'll go ahead and ask this one. So Marilyn wants to know, why do you not keep plants from the propagation classes in the JCRA's mist house anymore? Sophia.
We moved spaces and we have half as much space in the glass house right now. And it also, it took a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot when you say 15 flats, but it's a lot of shifting around. Everything roots at a different rate. So with those mixed flats, I would have things that rooted that were trying to climb out their pots. And then I would have things that were clearly not rooted. So then trying to keep track of, okay, I want to pull this out because it's going to start rotting, but this plant can't come out. And so trying to keep everyone's things together, it really needs individual care. Like
for sure.
For me, for us in the, so it was a space thing, but also like in order to keep the space healthy, it really needs, it needs individual attention. Each thing with the mixed flats, each thing needs individual attention, and they might need one thing, like I said, might need to be taken out in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then one thing might need to be taken out in 12 weeks.
For sure. And we have the technology to empower our participants to give that individual attention. We no longer keep the plants under mist at the JCRA, but we do give you a nice little humidity dome that goes on top of it to help you regulate the humidity in your trays. And
that is perfectly, like having the humidity dome is a totally viable way.
It's super viable.
It can be a little bit, again, with everything in propagation, it can be finicky to get it adjusted. But once you get it tuned in, and I think a lot of times what happens is it's too dry.
Do you think so? I feel like most people are afraid that their cuttings are going to dry out. They don't believe that the humidity dome is going to keep everything in, and they just over mist. That's what I've seen people do in my experience. I mean, if you are misting those things every day, that's probably too much. And
and I think I'm not sure if we give the books out. Well, I guess that answers your question. If you have specific question, like if you have a specific instance where something didn't work, maybe we can. But that's a short answer of why.
Yeah, for sure. So we can have more space to make more of the wonderful plants that we have here.
Our space got cut, but in addition,
we figured out a workaround.
Keeping our space healthy too, because having stuff go down, it's a lot of resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't appear as though there are any more questions in the chat. So, but one thing I would like to just reiterate something that Sophia said, and she said you want to put this thing where you're okay with it getting wet. Like we said, these things can fail at any time. That's part of their charm, part of their fun. It's always at inopportune times, and you got to deal with it. So just like where you put it, be okay with the fact that it may just randomly explode, and you may have to. I
don't think I mentioned it, but in the summer, if you've got a shaded spot outside, it would totally be fine to have this outside.
Oh yeah.
And maybe even preferable, because it's going to be, you're going to get a little bit of you'll get that temperature fluctuation during the day. And our houses tend to be really dry.
No kidding, for sure. Just anecdotally, one summer we were growing tomatoes, and I just like cut a stem off of it, and just for fun, growing it in full sun in a container, just for fun, I cut it off and I just stuck it in that very same container. Didn't mist it, just like kept up the regular irrigation that we were doing, which was like once a day, because tomatoes sure do get thirsty. The thing rooted. The thing rooted in full sun. It did with no humidity control whatsoever. It's just tomatoes are like super eager to root. They're really easy peasy, but like some things you really could get away with just building this mist system out underneath a tree in your backyard, somewhere that's away from your house, and just like having it there and just away from everything. And but still having that mist to keep all the turgidity of the cells.
Oh, turgidity.
Turgidity. I'm not going to pass up an opportunity to throw that word around. Okay. Alrighty. Actually, it looks like there is a question. Hale asked, who makes the timer that we used? And we did drop a link in the chat earlier, and it looks like Oh, it was some random company in China, but there is a link that you can use to find it on Amazon, and it, like Sophia mentioned in that supplementary video, there are good directions on how to get it programmed and how to get it going. Okay. And that appears to be all of the questions. So thank you so much, Sophia, for pulling this together. It was really fun. It's really fun to
putting it together.
Yeah, it was. It's fun to see your personality when you do things, because the little comments you make, they're always good, and you are always full of lots of nuggets of wisdom from your vast experience with working with plants, whether you're aware of that or not. Like, you do have a lot of good things to teach all of us. So
You mean not everyone just knows how stuff works? Like, not everyone just has solenoids?
Right, yeah, no, it's true. Not everyone just has solenoids.
I don't understand.
We really
You don't have a box?
But we do appreciate you sharing all that with us,
Yeah,
Sophia.
happy to.
And we appreciate all of you for joining us today. Make sure you are back here next Wednesday at 3 o'clock for the midweek program. We will have Bobby Modern, who is the Director of Horticulture over at Duke Gardens. He will be here having a garden conversation with our own Director of Horticulture, Greg Page. So that should be a lot of fun. Make sure you are here next Wednesday at 3 for that, and we will see you all then. Y'all take care.